Hey, and welcome back to the Drama-Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm so happy you're joining me today. This episode I kind of put off recording until like almost the last minute, just because I'm one of those people that in order to talk about things, like I feel like I need time to process, and sometimes I have to remember that I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to know everything to share stuff, but I just wanted to share today just some tips about dealing how to just take care of how to take really good care of yourself through a season of change and transition in your life. Um, this is a topic that has come up so much in my work as a dietitian, health coach, and fitness instructor. And as a human on this planet, you know, we all go through different seasons of life, whether it's exciting, uncertain, maybe both. Um, and there are times where these seasons we might feel like everything's coming together, everything's kind of clicking along, working out the way we want it to, and then other times we just feel like we're hanging on for the ride and just trying to make sense of everything, or we're adjusting to new routines, and it's something that so a few things that can come up for people, feeling like your sense of identity is not what it was before. You're like, who am I now? Or you're learning new routines and you're trying to figure stuff out. Self-care can feel really challenging during those times. And I just want to take a sec to normalize feeling out of sorts. You know, even good change is change, right? And your nervous system doesn't always know the difference between good change and bad change to a degree. Yes, you will experience it differently in your body, but sometimes our nervous system is just like, whoa, this is new and weird. What's happening? And I just want to take a sec to normalize that. Um, and just what I'm going to share with you today, a few of my favorite strategies just to help you stay nourished, strong, and mentally grounded without feeling like you have to overhaul everything in this season of your life. So, if you've been listening for a while, this podcast somehow is over 5 years old, actually, maybe closer to six, which is crazy. And like when I started this podcast, I was a single woman living in a studio apartment in New York, and suddenly it'll be almost 5 years. I've been living out in New Jersey. I'm married with two cats. And, as, and as if you're listening to this, you've already possibly seen on my Instagram that I recently shared some news about our family growing. But just so much has changed. And, during that time, I've gone through all these different professional transitions, personal transitions. Especially the last few years, oh my, and the last few months, really, like, there's for those of us who are out there in the podcast world, in the social media world, the business world, like, there's this sense of needing to be mindful of your public persona or what you are putting out there. And as someone who's also a licensed healthcare provider, I'm always trying to be thoughtful of if one of my clients or patients like comes across, something I'm sharing out there and, in my social media, in a podcast episode or something I'm saying in an article or even in my books, I'm always keeping that in mind. Like, how is that going to affect someone else? And of course, my ego is like, well, what are they going to think of me if I share that? I think that's just, but I'm often looking through that lens of what's helpful to share, what's not helpful to share. And oftentimes that means that I just keep a lot to myself about my personal life. And I think that to a degree that can be healthy. I also think just as a human, we need time to process what we're going through and to live, and we don't have to tell everybody everything. But, I've gotten questions along the way from different people over time, and as I've shifted my work life and have a little more freedom to share things, I do want to let you guys in on, some really awesome stuff. But you know, sometimes I will say, as I'm recording this, I'm going through a massive season of change. So by the time you are listening to this episode, I'm expecting to feel all healed up and everything is good. But I had breast surgery early in June to remove what we'll just call a little problem area that my doctors have been monitoring and biopsying over and over for a few years. And finally, after the last biopsy in April of 2025, they were like, it's time for it to come out. And, that was both like a relief to have a plan, but also like surgery is scary and it involves time to heal. And even though in the grand scheme of things, it was, a much smaller surgery compared to what so many other women go through, it still requires healing time. And, as I'm recording this, I'm still wearing a zip up bra, which actually I think I'm gonna hang on to these. Like these are actually really comfortable, and I should have started wearing these like forever ago. It's so much better than pulling a sports bra over your head. But anyway, not sharing pictures about that part of my journey because boobs on the internet is not my brand. But it's definitely just been interesting timing for me to think about this. Like right now. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can't lift anything over 5 pounds for, another few days or so. So my 23-pound cat beef is feeling a little bit neglected right now. But if this is it's something that, I did for risk reduction benefits. I in my Instagram highlights, if this is something that you're interested in reading more about, I'm not going to spend too much time on it today. I do have a breast wellness highlight that includes some work I've done on this topic, but also my own story and some of the emotions and the experiences that are all involved in that. The breast is a very emotional part of the body, and it's been, having had this experience over the last, as I'm recording, it's over 4 years of all these different, tests and procedures and all the emotions and the fears and the what ifs that come with that. It's been a really intense time. And all through that journey, I was also going through a fertility journey, which I joke sometimes is much more of a spiritual quest. And I'll be honest, as a healthcare provider, it was really challenging to be dealing with these breast abnormalities that were showing up on my tests. And it was also really hard to be dealing with infertility. And it's something that at a later date, when I have more perspective, I do intend eventually to share more on it to the degree that it can be helpful for someone else. But I definitely dealt with imposter syndrome. I remember thinking things like, well, if, my clients knew that I was having trouble, having a baby, like they probably wouldn't come to me because they would think that I couldn't help them. Things like that would go through my head. And the thing is, all of our experiences are so different, and I think I had to learn that way of just accepting myself and accepting that like my body is not my business card. What it can and can't do is not reflective of how I can support other people, really. But I think I had to go through that journey. But um, and it's been an interesting experience. I waited so long to share this, but I recently did share on Instagram that very soon my husband and I are expecting a baby girl by a surrogate. Um, and that's another thing. I will be able to talk more at a later date about our story. Um, I didn't share until I felt really ready because I just wanted to spend a little time in that cocoon. Like when you go through so much grief and loss and disappointment, it feels really weird to share good news. Um, and also, when we're talking about something that is less conventional, not as understood, I think there was a side of me that was scared of being judged. And I think after going through the experience of knowing I was going to be having surgery, I stopped caring and I just wanted to focus on being healthy and present and mentally strong for this little girl. I met her in a dream in 2021, um, and continued to have these experiences where I was just connecting with this little soul. And if you don't believe in that stuff, that's totally fine. But if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you already do because you're used to me. But it made it so hard because I remember feeling like I don't get it. Like she's here, she's right, she's so close, she's around me all the time, but she's not physically like here. And it took me a while to really understand that my body was trying to tell me something and that it was okay that what my story would be was going to be different from other people's. It just took me realizing that I have nothing to prove to really feel ready to make the next step. As I remember, gosh, I remember the day I got the phone call from the doctor telling me that we had one viable embryo after I did this whole egg retrieval process. And at first, I was so pissed off at myself. I was like, "What the hell, courting? Like, you take amazing care of yourself. You guys don't even want to know how many like thousands of dollars I probably spent over the years on like acupuncture and supplements and tests and doctors, like all the things. That's even before I did all the hormones. But like, oh man, and then I was like, wait a minute, we have a viable embryo. That's amazing. Like, that's so cool. And she was like, do you want to know what the gender is or the sex? And I was like, I think I already know, but yeah, I want you to tell me. And it was a girl. And I just remember I got goosebumps. I had checked in with this little spirit so many times along the way to like make sure like are you good with this, do you want to come in this way, like are you, is this the right time for you, like and one day I'll share all of the little signs that I got, but it was just so incredible, and it was the biggest emotional gamble ever to take this one embryo and like try this different way. But I think in my gut I knew that, it was not about like proving that I could do it. It was really like what was going to be the best for this little person. And if this is not something you guys want to talk about, totally fine. We're moving on in a moment, but I just wanted to share that I'm so thankful, that one, that this was an option for us, but I'm also really grateful just in this process over the last few years. All of the people who have just shown me their love and support and shared their stories with me. Wow. It's one of those weird silver linings I never expected to encounter. And I'm just so grateful that that was something I got to experience. Just really just human connection and women supporting women. And wow. And even as we've told friends and family, and now shared with the internet about our surrogacy journey, the little bit that we've shared, it means a lot to me that so many people have been kind and supportive. And if it's something that is not in many circles is not well understood, I'm happy to link to some resources here in the show notes just to answer. Like the Mayo Clinic has some great info, Cleveland Clinic has some great info, just basics, what it's about. But at a later date, I will share more. Just want to give myself some time. But so obviously, yeah, I know I'm going to be going through a lot of changes in the weeks and months ahead. I'm entering this new season of motherhood. And, while there's lots of ways I feel prepared or I have prepared, I also know there's so much that I couldn't possibly prepare for. And, we all go through all these different seasons, right? And what I found in my own experience, what I found for my patients and clients over the years, is that these seasons of change and transition, even when it's really happy, amazing stuff, that can often be most challenging, emotionally, sometimes physically, and these can be times when we're extra vulnerable to struggles related to our physical health and our mental health. So the last few weeks, as I've been getting ready for our daughter's arrival, I've been thinking a lot about just thinking of some of the favorite tips that I have found really helpful in the past, things that my patients and clients have found really helpful. So I wanted to share them with you too. Maybe this isn't something that you need today, but maybe 3 weeks, 6 months from now, you'll find yourself in a season of change and want to revisit this and just, look at these different ways of how you can still take really, really good care of yourself, even when everything is changing around you. So, number one, redefine what balance looks like. What worked last month, last year, in your 20s, like it could be totally different from what works for you now. And that's okay. Like, let the old stuff go and embrace a new balance. Also, focus on what is essential and sustainable. This is not a time for perfection. Let that shit go. A question I really like to ask during times like where, big transition times is questions like, what helps me feel most like myself right now? Other things can be, what is the best use of my time in this moment? Just really just what is essential, what is sustainable for you, and let your routine just flex a little bit to fit your current energy instead of trying to fit yourself around all this long list of things that you think you should be doing. So redefine what balance looks like. Number two, keep nutrition simple and supportive. As an RD, you guys know I always like to talk about this stuff, and this is not going to be shocking to hear this from me, but prioritize meals that are stabilizing to your blood sugar. So by that, I mean make sure your meals have protein, healthy fats, and fiber. This helps keep our blood sugar more stable, which is essential for our energy, our mood, just day-to-day body function. So definitely pay attention to having that balance of nutrients when you're eating. Um, and also lean into easy, repeatable meals. Like you don't have to come up with new stuff all the time. I sometimes I'm going through a phase right now where I'm not posting as much food content on Instagram because I just feel like I'm eating a lot of the same things because I've just been like, just sometimes we go through phases where we just can't think about creative stuff, and that's fine. Like when my dad was sick, for months I lived off of like salad and frozen vegetables and yogurt bowls and tons of sardines and slow cooker chicken, and that was kind of it. Like I threw avocados on stuff, and that was kind of like there was not much variety happening because I just couldn't get my head around it. So if you're that's where you're at right now, like give yourself permission. In my world, when I need things that are just easy, I do a lot of like sheet pan meals, smoothies, still love my yogurt bowls and salads. I love the whole nourish bowl trend, where you've got like your greens and your protein and your healthy fat. You've got maybe some grains in there, some other cooked veggies. So I'm really into that stuff. So just tap into what's easy and that you can make over and over. And then this is another thing that does come up sometimes is the whole clean eating. I freaking hate that term. And whenever I have like a client or like someone I'm interviewing and they start talking about clean eating, I do my best to keep a straight face, but I fucking hate it. I fucking hate that clean eating line. Oh my God. Um, what I do like is talking about fueling your body, fueling your mind, fueling your body. That's what I like to make it about during these times of transition and change. Like right now, as I'm physically healing from surgery, I will think about, okay, right now I need protein to help with healing the tissue. I need zinc to support immune system function and wound healing. I need vitamin C for the same purpose, antioxidants. So I'm looking for food sources of those things. And like, yes, I'm a dietitian and that's how my brain works. But for any person, thinking about what foods help you feel good, what makes you feel grounded physically, like what do you feel well after you eat it. So I would invite you to think about that, then think about, trying to quote unquote eat clean, because that's what, you think you're supposed to do. And just spoiler, like what often is nourishing for the body tends to align well with what's considered clean, but the mentality is different. I find that the fueling your body comes from a much more compassionate place, whereas clean eating has a bit more of a, I don't know, like a rules kind of vibe. And I hate rules. Sagittarius problems. And then the other one, keep snacks on hands that feel good for your mood, support healthy metabolism. So none of these will be shocking, I'm sure, but things like nuts, hard-boiled eggs, crispy chickpea snacks, your favorite protein bars, protein drinks, things that are easy. I also, if hard-boiled eggs are not your jam, I also really love those little like frozen egg and veggie bites. Those are so convenient. So, but for me, I do a lot of Greek yogurt. We do a lot of cottage cheese in my house. So just like paying attention to what helps you feel strong, nourished, helps you feel like a functional human. And then third, shifting your movement mindset. So movement, it doesn't have to be structured or intense to be meaningful. But what is meaningful is consistency. I'm a big fan of the consistency over intensity school of thought. And this is coming from someone who has a history of overuse injuries, like in my 20s, because I also in your 20s, it's just, I found that in that phase of my life, I was not as present in my body. I was still processing a lot of trauma. I was not as, it just didn't feel safe to be in my body. And I have to remind myself sometimes when I am dealing with something that triggers that trauma response to just stay in my body, like not to try to numb out with activities or whether it's work or whether that's like physical activity. Like I do notice that as a thing I have to be thoughtful of. But sometimes when we're going through really busy times, we have less time to move. And even when we want to be, moving, it's harder to make that time. I share a little bit of how to make time for movement when you have no time in actually both my books, but I have a whole section on it in the my second book, The Farewell Tour. But micro movements like 10-minute walks, gentle stretching, some body weight strength, like that can be enough sometimes during these transition periods. Because especially if you're under a lot of stress, maybe you're not sleeping well, um, your body might respond differently to movement. So stay in your body, pay attention to how you feel, but know that even a little bit is still giving you something physically and mentally. That said, sometimes it can feel really good to do more intense movement, and that can also be great. But I would say just give yourself permission to be curious about what serves you at this point in time. So a question I love to ask myself during these kinds of times and what I would recommend to my patients, my clients is, in terms of movement, ask, is my current fitness routine supporting or depleting me? If it feels supportive, you're noticing it helps you feel more energized, grounded, helps you feel strong, that's green light, all good stuff. But if you're noticing that your physical activity routine is making you feel exhausted, cranky, irritable, out of it, that's a sign to pull back a little bit or to adjust what you're doing. So be curious and shift your movement mindset. And then number four, anchor yourself with mini mindfulness rituals. So yeah, I think sometimes we've all seen those videos, right? Of like the 1 hour morning routine with like, the candles and the journal and the matcha and all that stuff. And hey, that stuff is lovely. I love all that stuff. But I have not had that time for a really long time. And just new seasons often mean mental overload. Um, so, anchoring ourselves with small, repeatable habits can be really helpful for just helping us stay grounded in our day. So, just a few examples that could be morning breath work, or even like taking a deep breath when you first wake up. Journaling, that could be as complex or as simple as you want it. I feel like I'm very curious to see how this evolves when I have a little one that I'm caring for. Like, I am someone who feels like I need to put pen to paper for even if it's like a paragraph to make me feel normal during the day. So, I've had people do like one word to just write how they're feeling, or do like bullet journaling. Um, Other things like walking, whether it's, without your phone, if you're really ambitious, or any time spent in nature, like being outside. Someone I work with, she just steps out into her backyard every morning just to, take a breath of the fresh air and just ground herself. She's drinking her coffee. Or you can set intentions for the day. You don't have to write it down or do anything specific, but maybe as you're having, your glass of water in the morning, you're just thinking like, how do I want to feel today? Or this is what I want to bring into the day. Or, even if it's just something that you want to feel during the day, or, you know, setting some kind of intention can be meaningful. Maybe you do a few minutes of stretching every morning, or, maybe you meditate for 3 minutes. Anything that's small, repeatable, something you can do every day. So I would invite you to explore that. Nighttime is another great time, actually, to have these little rituals. I will say for myself, the end of day brain dump in a journal is like so helpful for me. But it could even just be like your skincare routine or taking a quick shower to wash the energy of the day away, whatever works for you. But some little grounding ritual. These rituals are helpful because they create familiarity when everything else feels new. So even though it might not seem like much, it can go a long way. And then number five, protect your energy, especially online. This is one I probably struggle with the most. I remember when I learned the word for what an empath is, I was like, oh, that's my problem. Like, but just to know that new seasons of life, like they can make us more just more sensitive in general, but especially more sensitive to comparison and to overstimulation. Because, we're comparing ourselves to where others are at on their journey, or where we perceive they're at. And we are more likely to get overstimulated because we're processing all this new stuff. And, with that comes all the emotions. And if our schedule is changing, maybe we're not feeling in rhythm with like our sleep and our meal timing and movement and all that. So just to be really mindful of that, just know that you're probably going to be more sensitive and you need to guard your energy better. Um, I highly recommend curating your social media feed. So by that I mean hide or mute or just unfollow the stuff that's not helping you. I recently did a big social media purge and it felt so fucking good. Like, so if it's not serving you, get rid of it. You don't need to see that. And whether that's temporarily muting something, I've definitely done that before, whether it's completely unfollowing something, unsubscribing from, newsletters, blogs. If people still read blogs, I guess I still have one, but I don't know if anybody reads it. Well, my analytics tell me that people find it, but I don't know. Um, but just give yourself permission to not engage with the stuff that makes you feel like crap. And you might be surprised. Sometimes stuff that we used to love consuming media wise is not what works for us anymore. And just be okay with that. And know that you can also come back to stuff. Just because you unfollow something now doesn't mean you can't start following it in another year. But give yourself permission to unfollow and curate. Something else I think is really important, and I often try to check in with myself about this, is just to be mindful of how often you are consuming versus creating versus resting. Um, we all have different relationships to media. And honestly, just to interactions with other people. We all have different relationships to that, but just being mindful of like, your like how much time do you spend scrolling and looking at stuff? How much time do you spend creating things, putting stuff out there? And then are you resting? Are you taking time away from your devices? Are you taking time by yourself or in an environment that helps you feel restored? Is the consuming and or the creating time, is that taking away from your rest time? I will say that's something I struggle with a lot. I am probably always going to be working on learning how to rest, but keeping that balance in mind and knowing that when we are overstimulated, it is really easy to get sucked into over consuming or over creating and not resting enough. I think can help us set some boundaries. And on the note of boundaries, just be really clear with yourself about what and who gets your energy. It's really hard to say no sometimes, especially when you are a people pleaser, you want to let folks down, like, or you feel like you have to do things for XYZ reasons. You know, just to be mindful if that's a tendency you have and keep it in check. Something people tell me a lot, because having shared now that, we are expecting a daughter, people have been giving me some advice. Most of it is great advice, by the way, like that. So thank you for that. There's always the odd thing where you're like, whoa, that person doesn't know me at all. But I think something that comes up a lot is using like how your time is measured differently. And whether that's related to children or whether that's related to something else that you really care about in your life. Whenever we're saying yes to something, we're saying no to something else usually to make time for that thing we're saying yes to. So be super clear with yourself about what is and is not worth your time and your energy. So just to recap, the 5 tips that I want to share with you that I think are really helpful for taking really good care of yourself when you're going through a season of change are to redefine what balance looks like. Keep nutrition simple and supportive. Shift your movement mindset. Anchor yourself with mini mindfulness rituals and protect your energy, especially online. And listen, like, you don't need to be thriving to be growing. We all go through seasons where we feel like we're a hot mess, and that's part of being a human on this planet. So I would say give yourself some grace. Self care during a transition phase, it's not about mastering it, it's really about supporting yourself through it. And all seasons are temporary. So if you are feeling challenged and stretched and you're not so sure about the one you're in, just know that another one is coming. So, look for, if it helps you to look for the lessons in the current season, if it helps you to take stock of all the things you're grateful for right now, to remember the fact that, right where you are right now is probably where you once really wanted to be a really long time ago and didn't think you could ever get to. Like, whatever you need to do to remind yourself of that, but just be kind to yourself. So I would just invite you to take one step today that supports where you are now, not where you used to be, not where you think you should be. And So, lastly, just want to share that I am going to be taking some time off to be present with my family this summer, but I do have a bunch of content scheduled for you on this podcast and on social media into the summer, even into fall. I'll be popping in real time here and there, mostly on Instagram and my Substack. So, if you're not already connected with me on there, but you want to stay in touch, please, do so. I'm gonna have the links below in the show notes, but I'm very easy to find on Instagram at Jess Cording, all one word. And my Substack is jessicacording.substack.com, which is my What the Fuck to Eat Substack. So if you want to join us there, I would love to hang out with you. I've also got some offerings coming up in the fall I'm really excited to share more about soon. So yeah, stay tuned. If you know somebody who would benefit from this episode, maybe they're going through some big changes or they're getting ready to go through some big changes, I would invite you to pass this along to them if you think that it would do them some good. It means so much to me when you guys tell me that you shared my podcast with someone or that someone sent my podcast to you and you found it useful. If you like what you hear, please consider leaving a 5-star review, subscribe, share with your friends. It means so much to me that you guys take the time to be here and listen. I couldn't do this without you. So, thank you all so much for your time, your energy, your support. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.